Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our info session to learn more about our Assyrian Studies Association's Assyrian Academic Research Grant. During this info session, we hope you discover everything you need to know about the grant and learn insider tips for crafting a standout application. Plus, this is the time we encourage you to actually take the time to ask questions. Especially during our Q&A session towards the end of the info session. And to do so, you can use either the chat feature or the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. As a gentle reminder, the grant application is currently open until June 30th, and you can apply online by visiting our website, AssyrianStudiesAssociation.org/Assyrian Academic Research Grant. A little bit later during the actual info session, I'll go ahead and post the link to our website as well as to the application as well. Before we begin, I want to briefly introduce two of our panelists who will be able to discuss the grant in depth and help answer your questions, as well as myself. I will help answer those questions. The first of which is Dr. Michel Chamounpour. He's a molecular anthropologist at Binghamton University who specializes in population genetics of Middle Eastern and Pacific populations. He's also a member of our board of directors and has served on previous grant committees of the Assyrian Academic Research Grant. Our second panelist is Dr. Mariam Georgis and is an associate professor who conducts research that's situated in the intersection of global politics, critical indigenous studies, and Middle Eastern studies. She's also the member of our board of directors and will also serve on the current grant committee for this grant. With that said, let's proceed to provide an overview of today's info session. So what we are going to be sorry, can you also go to the next slide?
Oh,
yeah, thank you, Mariam.
sorry.
Perfect.
There.
So with today's session, we will go over and introduce the academic grant and kind of give you an overview of who our past recipients were. Provide a little bit of the grant timeline, when to expect an announcement, when to expect a grant dispersion, and then also in depth go over the application materials and what the committee members are looking for in your application. And also at the end, we'll save a good amount of time for the Q&A. And then so the next slide, if you don't mind. Perfect. So about this grant, so ASA funds mostly graduate students for this particular grant, either master's or PhD, and as well as postdoctoral researchers of up to $2,000 in USD. Research must focus on the promotion of Assyrian culture and heritage within any field of the social sciences, humanities, or natural science, with a priority given to multidisciplinary research. And very importantly, this must be a solo project, so no co-authorship. So in the past, we funded dissertation projects or research projects that are just solo authored. As well as being a grant recipient, you are expected to present at the 2025 Assyrian Studies Symposium, which is held between October 24th to the 26th at Arizona State University. And so the next slide that we have, we kind of go over our past grant recipients. The first of which is standout, and he was awarded in 2020. He was our first recipient for this grant, and we funded the continuation of his PhD dissertation research. And his research topic was on Assyrian crisis of identity and discourse of nationalism among the members of the Syriac Orthodox Church in Germany. And our most recent recipient is Esther Elia, and she was awarded in 2022. And this grant was to be used for her master's thesis to create an exhibition of handmade clay bowls, gathering contemporary prayers from the Assyrian community, writing them in the bowls and exhibiting them alongside voice recordings of these submissions to create a visual and sonic installation of today's Assyrian community. And really importantly, and the next slide that we have is a visual to represent the expectation we have of our grant recipients, which is presenting at our symposium. So this image is of Esther Elia. She presented at our 2023 Assyrian Studies Symposium, which was held at Stanford University. And so this is just to show a little overview of the type of expectations we have. So instead of just allowing our grant recipients to only use the funds for presenting, but also to kind of disseminate their research out in the crowd and to show exactly what we do and what we support, as well as the student receiving the grant to kind of gain that experience of presenting as well. The next slide that I have is going to be passed on, I think, or no, excuse me. The next slide is the grant timeline. And so grant is due by June 30th by 12 p.m. Pacific. And the grant committee will review all applications and provide notifications by August of this year. And also this date indicates notifying those who did not receive the grant. We'll try our best to kind of notify what specifically needed to be improved on the grant application, but that is not always expected. But we will just notify you if you have received the grant or have not. Grant disbursements do go out late October / early November of this year. And very importantly, there's also a grant report that the recipient needs to submit no later than the following year, November 1st. So I think the next is Michelle.
Hey, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. So continuing on what Alexandra brought to your attention, in terms of application material, well, the main item would be the research proposal. We'll get into the details of that in a minute. It's going to be a 5 to 10 page. That's what we require, no longer than 10 pages. We believe that it should be at least 5, as you will see in the details, double spaced, let's say, font size 12. Along with the research proposal, separate from that, we need what we need from you is a project budget. We're going to get to that, but we would like it to be as detailed as possible. We understand that we might receive applications that come from a very wide variety of types. So we understand that you might be asking maybe almost entire budget is just like 1 or 2 lines, but sometimes could be numerous, and we want to make sure that you just do not just give us your estimate of how much you think your budget costs, but we'll get into details of that. Along with that, we want your CV, of course, as well as a letter of recommendation from your faculty advisor. If you click through the next two, sorry, can we go back to the previous slide? I want to make sure that I'm
Sorry.
not missing. Oh, okay. I thought that. So I'm going to add here that, along with that, we want a letter of recommendation from the faculty advisor or mentor, and then you're just going to submit it to online to our grant application. Thank you, Mariam. Sorry. Let's just go on to the next. All right. So like I said, the research proposal is the main item. In total, is going to be 5 to 10 pages. Now, what are we looking for in your research proposal? First, please make sure that you have clearly separate introduction, literature review and theory, as well as methodology and research plan. So as indicated here in these 3 bullet points, we would like to see a very brief introduction. It could be a single page up to 2 full pages, where you basically will focus on the statement of the problem. What is it that you are wishing to do? What problem your research would address? And what is the significance of your research? But we also expect from you to provide us, to basically show us that you have the theoretical knowledge necessary to address those problems. And that's where literature review is important. So the next part is actually kind of like overall the longest part of your application. We're looking for 2 to 5 pages, depending on the subject and nature of your project, where you will briefly address the gap in literature. You will say, how would you fill in a gap, or how your research will further address a certain question or problem related to the Assyrian research. The third and last part is methodology and research plan. In 2 to 3 pages max, we want you to explain to us, and in other ways, demonstrate to us that you have a plan and you're familiar with the methodology that would get you to the point, will make it possible for you to address the problem. Now, this could be qualitative or quantitative, so and either of them will be fine. That's where you basically will tell us what your research plan is. If you go to the next slide, please. A little bit more about the introduction. So now the 3 parts of the research proposal, like I said, first starts with the 1 to 2 pages of introduction. Now, we recommend, I personally think that if you want to take a screenshot of this slide, so you have the text for yourself, or if you're taking notes, but overall, your introduction should cover the key elements of your proposal. I trust that some of you at least have submitted grant applications elsewhere, so it's the same principle, right? In introduction, you want to show us, you want to demonstrate your knowledge of the background, and you want to briefly give us an overview of your project, what your project entails. And one important part of that would be the statement of problem. You will state the problem that you will try to address. So what is the background? What is the rationale for the project? That's basically it. Beyond that, the second important thing is the research goals or objectives. Now, we understand that sometimes you can have multiple objectives, and one or several objectives also might have their own sub-objectives. Please note, we do not want all of that detail here. You're not going to have enough room actually for that. You probably want to use these 1 or 2 pages of introduction economically. So here, you're just going to give an overview of the research goals and objectives, and then you can get into the sub-objectives later in your application, in your research proposal. If we move on to the next slide, please. The next part of, no, that's okay. So the second part of the research proposal, as I briefly mentioned a minute ago, is literature review and theory. So again, as far as I know, I think Alexandra and Marian would agree, this is also always required pretty much from any kind of a grant application anywhere, right? You are supposed to demonstrate your knowledge of your background knowledge relevant to this study. I would like to emphasize before I forget that this part should be thoroughly cited, right? So you need to show us the citations, you need to show us the sources, and make sure that you have a list of those sources also, provided. I guess at the end of the research at the bottom of the research proposal. We will be reading that part, and I think this is the part where you can convince us that you have a good theoretical understanding of what your research would entail. So make sure that this is kind of a selective, and we understand there are limits to this. So if you have a larger project, you might not necessarily include everything in here, but we leave that to you to decide what you will include in this part of your research proposal. Finally, in terms of the literature review, you should include how you're building your theoretical argument and framework from your previous research, assuming that there was some research done before. Now, our guess would be that some of you already might have started a project and you need support in terms of continuing that. This would be the part to kind of also demonstrate what is it that you have done so far and how you're going to build on your previous research if that's the case. And this is also where you can introduce your hypothesis or hypotheses or your research questions. Moving on to the last part of the research proposal, if you click for the next slide, thank you, is the methodology and research plan. Again, very briefly, I introduced this part. This section would details the activities that to be undertaken. This is where you're going to say, okay, through these 2 or 3 or 4 steps, I will be able to achieve the goals of this research project. You need to indicate how you plan to obtain the data. For instance, you're going to collect it yourself. Maybe you need to hire some students, to do that. Or maybe this is existing data, what we call existing data, meaning the data is publicly available to you, but you need to spend time in order to access and download and manage that data. We understand that that also can have its costs. You should also describe the methods that you will use for analyzing this data. And if you do that, so please make sure that you include citations that are relevant to this methodology. For instance, if there is certain, I don't know, software that you need to use, or any kind of a methodology that has been there is methodological backing for that, you want to cite the sources that clarify further on the details of your methodology. And I think that is the end of my part. Am I right, Mariam? Or
Yep. So let's go over your application materials. So the next one is the project budget. So the Assyrian Academic Research Grant covers these expenses. So one is conducting fieldwork. So for example, travel expenses, dissertation completion, conference presentation fees. Usually at conferences you have to pay for registration or membership to the association to present, things like that. Software required to conduct the research, and journal publication costs. You can create your project budget using a spreadsheet or through a document or a PDF. Just make sure that it has all the requirements in it, so everything that you can think of to put it on there. The committee members would like to see the following discussed in your project budget. So the first is demonstrate that your budget is realistic by specifying the cost for each line entry. So it will help us if you include subtotals of various budget categories like transportation, supplies, conference fees, etc. Most of the time you can look these up if you haven't done them yet, because we understand that it might be an estimate, but it's still important to outline them all. The second is consider every possible expense. Make sure that the funds you are requesting are only for expenses that will be incurred during the research period, and that the items you intend to buy are allowed. So we will not fund a computer or automobile purchases, for example. And that brings us to the very end of our slides, and we are happy to take questions now if there are any, or go over anything that you need further clarification on.
Right. We want to take this time because we're leaving a lot of time and yes, time and space to make sure that we're going to be addressing all your questions before submitting your application on June 30th, so that we can make sure that you are a very competitive applicant. So we've done one type of Assyrian Academic Grant webinar a few years back, and so we found it to be quite helpful for applicants. So we want to make sure that we answer your questions. And so the first of which is there a form of guidance or support from ASA board of directors? If yes, what does that look like? I think form of guidance or support, are you referring to maybe reviewing applications? Is that the specific type of question, or in terms of them helping people with the application, if you can specify? During the research. Okay. Michelle or Mariam, if you want to.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I would say personally, I would be happy to try to help someone, but you have to consider the fact that, well, this all depends on the nature of your project, right? So so if it's something that, for instance, I feel like I have enough expertise to be able to meaningfully help, I will definitely do so. I would welcome you to reach out to us, but please note that we may or may not be able to actually really help you with that, because it really depends on what your project is about. I would say this remind me of the fact that just like that, while you will be in charge of your project, that's why we also want to make sure that you have a faculty advisor who understands the project and understands your responsibilities and is available to support you, during the course of conducting your research. But if you, so I'm answering this question assuming that you're talking about us as an additional potential source, in addition to your faculty advisor or maybe other members of the committee if you're a PhD or a master's student. But generally, I would say yes, when and if possible, we will be happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm always happy to receive emails from Assyrian students doing graduate work. And if it falls under my umbrella, you could always look up people who are on the board and just kind of get a feel for what they do. Everyone has bios online. You can see if your work is similar or in the same like I wouldn't feel comfortable, because I want to make sure that whatever advice you're getting works for the institution you're at. Institutions have different standards, departments have different standards. So if someone who's an anthropologist contacts me, I'd be happy to help with certain things, but at the same time, I would say upfront, I am not an anthropologist, I'm a political scientist. And so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and check in with your advisor, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your research is meeting the standards set out by your department, by your university, so that you can get the degree that you are working towards. But I'm always happy to provide that kind of help from Assyrians who contact me.
Yeah, and I will also mention that the letter of support is really important. It just shows, it's basically just a letter that's going to support and endorse and improve and approve of your type of project that you are seeking funds for. So, and that only strengthens your project and your application in general. So, if you can get also your faculty advisor to maybe review your application before submitting it, I think that's also a very good path to take. Personally, I've done that in the past, especially as a PhD candidate, so that's very important and helpful. But I want to make sure there's we address other questions that you might have, maybe the material that we require for you to submit, or maybe the budget proposal or anything of that nature. But please go ahead and ask your questions.
We do have some suggestions as do's and don'ts for you, but I guess let's just wait a couple of minutes and see who else might have a question before we get to. All right, I'm going to just say two things that I took note to make sure I mention while we wait for any other questions from you. So I think first and foremost, I guess the joke is just like that, someone does not, because this has become a more common issue in general the past couple of years for some reasons. But I hear from many people that they receive incomplete applications for things, meaning that the more often than before, people seem to be missing something that we, let's say, a grant proposal was looking for. So I want to make sure that just to remind you, please, to kind of do your best to follow our instructions and what we are asking of you. Other than that, basically, if you have this required number of pages, for instance, so there's a reason for that. I personally agree that, you might find that some of them, I don't know, limiting, or it just might not make sense to you. That being said, generally, we're supposed to follow the guidelines, so if there's these requirements, and if you do not meet the general requirements, that's usually an easy way, to lose the opportunity to be funded. Right. So I strongly recommend you to do your best to meet the criteria that we ask of you. Beyond that, it's of course about the quality of your work, and then we will have to make that decision um, after we review it. The second thing, very quickly, and if anyone else has anything to say, would be that we also acknowledge that there's going to be actually a wide variety of types of research that you might be interested in. So please do not limit yourself. Do not overthink how your proposal might compare to others. Just as long as this is something that you personally find meaningful, the odds are that it's the kind of application that we're looking for. So please make sure that you demonstrate to us that you have a good working knowledge of the project. You basically have a clear plan, and you have a decent understanding of the background information, and that's really all that we're looking for. Beyond that, of course, the relevance is important, but then, well, depending on how many applicants we have, quite frankly, then we might have to choose one of them based on all of these criteria. But again, to my personal experience with the previous ASA grants, but also some other grants, including NSF grants, many applications get discarded early on because they do not meet the criteria, or they're missing, for instance, I don't know, that CV is missing, the letter of recommendation is missing, etc. So if you just have a complete package, you already are starting with a very good chance to receive the grant. That's all I had.
So we have another question, and thank you, Michelle, for providing a little bit more detailed and pros and cons to certain applications and what are sometimes is missing from students' grant applications. So this question is, if someone received money from ASA already, for example, a travel grant, I think possibly like the travel grant we issued for our symposium to present, can we still apply? I can definitely answer that question. So yes, you can definitely apply to this grant. So there's no stipulation that says if you receive prior funds, then you can't apply. We strongly encourage everyone to apply and to make sure that, again, you have all the applications materials together. And we give equal opportunity to all. We will say that in the future, if another person apply to this particular grant and has already received it in the future and is applying again, we most definitely will not consider the application, but we'll make that as a note because we want to give other opportunities to other individuals as well to receive this particular grant versus the same person receiving it twice within maybe a 5-year increment or something similar. But great question. I think that's really important to understand as well. If we don't have any other questions from anybody else, I'm definitely going to, I think we can possibly end it short. If you do have questions post this info session, you can email us. So our email address is on our website, but I'll go ahead and give it here. It's info@assyrianstudiesassociation.org. And from now to the application deadline, if you have anything that you want to address that we didn't address, or if something comes up and you have a question about it, feel free to email us. We will respond within 24 to 48 hours. I will say that if you email us closer to the deadline, we might miss it just because as we have so many people applying and we get inundated with other emails as well. We hope that you enjoyed this, learned from this. It was educational, informative, and also helped you draft your application for this grant. I will pass the mic to both Michelle and Miriam. First of all, thank you for both of you for attending, for giving your insights on this, as well as being supportive to this particular info session. So I'm going to give it both to you to have the last word.
Just thanks for attending, and I'm really glad people are applying for this, and I want to wish you the best of luck.
Same here. Glad to, I guess, be able to present to you. Please do not hesitate to email us if you're contact us if you are need further, information. But otherwise, we look forward to receiving your applications. That's all.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Take care.